All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the shop, and today we are working on our 1978 Datsun 280Z project. In a previous video, I went ahead and stripped all of the firewall forward section of the car in preparation for some epoxy primer, a little bit of metal rust repair and things like that. We've got all that sorted and situated, and now it's time to actually throw some primer on it. Unfortunately, that big shop project that involved a lot of concrete cutting kind of spilled over into the freshly prepped metal area of the 280Z. So we're going to go ahead and clean all that stuff up again and then get it ready for the primer. All we need to do now is do a little bit of wax and grease remove on the fresh bare metal and get all the contaminants off of the metal, and then we will be ready to throw some Southern Polyurethane's epoxy primer on it. Now that we have applied the wax and grease remover and removed all the contaminants from the fresh metal, we wait 60 minutes. That's at least what the tech book says. Now during that time, we're going to go ahead and mix up our part A and B. Part A being the epoxy primer and part B being the activator. We're going to mix those. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning equal parts primer to activator. We're going to mix that up. I'm going to mix at least a quart because I think it's going to take at least that to get this whole area situated. And then we're going to let that induce. Now the tech manual says let that induce for at least 30 minutes, so we're going to take the time that this is drying for at least 60 minutes in evaporating the wax and grease remover. And we're going to add a little bit of efficiency to this whole timeline of things by taking the 60 minutes that the wax and grease remover takes to evaporate, and we're going to mix our part A to part B primer and activator together. While that takes only 30 minutes to induce, it does no harm by letting it induce a little bit longer. It has a pot life of a few days, so we're not going to worry about it setting up or becoming hard. Now, if you do that with clear coat, you will run into problems. The pot life on clear coat, most high solid clears is only about 4 hours, so only mix up what you need with clear coat and immediately spray it and clean all your stuff out. With primer, it's a little bit different. We have 72 hours of pot life, so 3 days. We're going to get around to spraying all of this within the next 3 days, so I don't really mind mixing maybe a little bit more than I need. I'm under the impression that I'm going to need more than a quart, so let's get busy doing that. Alright, now that we've given it enough time for all the wax and grease remover to evaporate and enough time for our epoxy primer and activator to induce, it's time to do the last and final step before we start spraying primer on this clean, fresh, bare metal. Now you may be thinking, if you use wax and grease remover and it should be free of contaminants, then what else is there to do except put the nice paint on or fresh paint on? You have to tack cloth. Now, what is tack cloth? It's something that I think we need to go over just a little bit. It's something that I see used incorrectly more often than not. Tack clothing. What is tack clothing or tack ragging? Why do you need to do it and why it's important? Even though you used wax and grease remover and got all the contaminants off embedded in the metal or on top of the surface of the metal, there's still airborne particles of stuff that's floating around in the air, and what it's going to do is it's going to land back on the metal, and you can wax and grease remove again until you're blue in the face. You're not going to get any contaminants, but you're going to get these little dust or debris, or nibs is what it's called, that can affect the surface quality of your paint. It's something that you want to do to help protect yourself of additional nibs and or debris. If you can prevent it, why not do it? These things are really cheap. They're less than like $2 a piece, and it's cheap insurance to make sure you're getting the best quality paint job out of a DIY environment. You have enough things you're facing on your own anyway that's going to prevent you from getting concourse restoration type paint work accomplished in your garage. There's no need for you to fight not only your spray equipment, your air supply, your environment in which you're painting in, the elements outside, for you to compound that with not getting it free of dust and debris using a simple thing such as a tack cloth. Now, most people use wax and grease remover incorrectly and back that up with using a tack cloth or tack rag incorrectly as well. They think if you just wet the rag, wipe the panel down, you see stuff on the rag, it's good to go. That's actually not true, and maybe I'll do a separate video showing it easier how to clean a panel with wax and grease remover in the future. If that interests you at all, go ahead and leave a comment down below, and I'll upload a separate video of that in the future. But tack clothing or tack ragging or tacking prior to your initial coat and or between coats, most of the time is done improperly because people see something on a video and they want to emulate that, and they either don't understand everything that's involved or the video doesn't show everything that's involved. So what a tack cloth is, it's a cheesecloth basically covered in a sticky substance that picks up all of the lint, dust, nibs, debris, any kind of bugs that may have landed on there or dead. Anything that is on the surface of the clean, fresh, prepped metal or surface that you're painting on. So you want a tack cloth, and most people just loosely bunch this thing up and then drag it across. And while that does get the contaminants off of the surface itself, what you run into is as soon as you start spraying, you've got this pressurized air that's blowing all kinds of new dust and debris into the air that you didn't anticipate on. So what I recommend doing, if you're going to go to the step of tack clothing, do it with the air supply of your paint gun that you intend to paint with in hand, along with spraying air, only air, not paint. That's the first half of the trigger action on your HVLP spray gun, so just go over that. It can be a little bit higher or the same air pressure, that really doesn't matter, but what does matter is as you're tack clothing, you do it with the air pressure, or you can do it with a blow nozzle, it doesn't really matter, in hand. That way you're blowing all of what you're not touching with the tack rag in the air to where it can either settle somewhere else or you're picking it up as it's being blown around. So what I like to do is just take the gun in hand, spray the panel with air only, and then tack cloth as I'm going around the panel. That helps ensure that not only is blowing the dust and debris out, but along the tape lines of where you've masked everything off, people skip that part too, and it doesn't matter how clean this stuff is that you're about to paint if you've got a ton of dust sitting on your masking paper and or tape that you're not actually cleaning. So that's a really important step. I thought I'd take the time to kind of explain that a little bit and hope that helps. So if you're gonna tack cloth, I recommend you tack clothing, and if you're going to tack cloth, do it with your gun in hand and spray air only over the surface as you're tack clothing. You're gonna get a lot more trapped dust and debris onto that tack cloth, and you're gonna blow the rest of it off of the surface anyway. So it prevents you from backtracking or working overtime on something that you thought you had accomplished in the beginning. So hope that helps. If so, click the thumbs up, leave a comment below, and we're gonna get busy spraying some primer now. All right, well, we got 2 coats of our Southern polyurethane epoxy primer sprayed on the car, firewall and forward, outside and inside, all along the engine bay and exterior. We put 2 coats of epoxy primer, wet on wet, giving about 15 to 30 minutes of flash time between each coat. We're gonna let that dry overnight. Then we're gonna come back tomorrow morning, hit it with some seam sealer, let that dry for at least 12 to 24 hours, if not longer, depending on how long that takes to cure. And then we're gonna come back and slap 1 more coat of epoxy primer on top of the seam sealer. And then we're gonna get busy with the Raptor liner on the outside, and then we're gonna throw some color. We're just going jet black on the engine bay, and then we're gonna throw some clear on top of that. So, see you guys tomorrow. As always, click that thumbs up button. If you got any questions, leave a comment below. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing and turn your bell notifications on. That way you get notified just as soon as I post another video. I appreciate it, as always. And until next time, thanks for watching this video.